I paid for my sister's wedding, flew in from across the country, stood at the altar as her maid of honor, and found out at the reception that she had been sleeping with my husband for 8 months. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just picked up the microphone and gave the most polite toast of my entire life. Then I went home and burned every single bridge at once. Okay, I've been going back and forth about posting this for 3 weeks. I've typed it out, deleted it, typed it again. My therapist says I should write it down somewhere outside of my own journal. So here we are. Reddit, you're my therapist now. Congratulations. My name doesn't matter. I'm 31 years old. I live in Seattle. I work in healthcare administration. I'm ordinary. I'm not dramatic. I am the person at every party who makes sure everyone has a drink and quietly fixes problems before they become scenes. I am the oldest of 3 kids. My sister Camille is 28. My brother Eli is 24. For the purposes of this story, the only people who matter are me, Camille, and my now ex-husband, Daniel. I want to paint a picture of who I was in relation to Camille before I tell you what happened, because I think it matters. I think context matters. I think if I just led with the headline, you'd think I was exaggerating or being dramatic, and I need you to understand that I am not that kind of person. Camille and I were close. Not we call each other twice a week close. Actually close. The kind of close where she called me from outside her OB's office at 22 years old because she'd gotten a scare and didn't want to call our mom. The kind of close where I drove 6 hours round trip to help her move into her first apartment because she was scared to do it alone. The kind of close where she was the first person I told when Daniel proposed, before I'd even called our parents. I loved Camille the way you love someone when you've watched them grow up, when you've protected them from things they don't even know about, when their happiness feels like a direct extension of your own. That kind of love is hard to explain to people who didn't grow up with it. It is also, I now understand, the kind of love that makes betrayal almost impossible to process in real time, because your brain genuinely cannot locate the category for it. I want to make sure you understand this before we continue. I am not a person this happens to. That's not me being arrogant. That's me being honest about the fact that I spent the better part of my adult life being careful, being loyal, being the person others came to. I did not see this coming. Not even a little. Daniel and I met when I was 26. He was in tech, charming in that quietly confident way that doesn't come across as trying too hard. He was funny. He remembered details. He asked follow-up questions when you told him something. He was the kind of man that made you feel seen. And if you've never experienced that particular feeling, I want you to know it is absolutely intoxicating. We dated for a year and a half before he proposed. We got married when I was 28, at a small outdoor ceremony in Oregon. My dad cried. My mom kept touching my face. Camille was my maid of honor. She gave a speech that made every single person in that room laugh and then immediately tear up. It was one of the best days of my life. Our marriage was not perfect, but I want to be very honest. It was not bad. We had good years. We traveled. We laughed. We disagreed about small things and worked through them. We talked about having kids and decided to wait a little longer. We were, by every external measure, doing well. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that I was not checked out. I was not neglecting the relationship. I was not absent or cold or difficult. I know the narratives people reach for when they hear about infidelity. Well, there must have been something wrong at home. And I want to preemptively say, maybe. Maybe there was something I couldn't see. But I was present. I was trying. I was in it. The first time I noticed something was approximately 6 months before Camille's wedding. Daniel had started texting more. Not in a way I could point to and say, that's suspicious. Just more. Quieter about it. Phone face down more often. I noticed it the way you notice a sound in your house that you can't quite identify. It registers somewhere in the back of your mind. And then you talk yourself out of it because everything else looks normal. I mentioned it to him once, casually. Something like, you've been on your phone a lot lately. He said work was stressful. He was dealing with a project deadline. I believed him. He was always dealing with something at work. I let it go. I did not know at that point that the person on the other end of those texts was my sister. Camille got engaged to her boyfriend Marcus in January of last year. Marcus is fine. He's a decent guy. A little boring, a little passive, but genuinely kind, and he clearly adored her, and that was enough for me. I was happy for her. I was genuinely, completely happy for her. I want to be transparent about the finances because I think it matters to the full picture. Camille had been struggling financially for a few years. She'd switched careers twice, had some credit card debt, was living paycheck to paycheck. Marcus was stable but not wealthy. Our parents are retired and on a fixed income. When it became clear that the wedding Camille wanted was not the wedding her budget allowed for, I stepped in. I paid for the venue deposit. I paid for the photographer. I contributed significantly to the catering. I flew my own family in from Seattle. I took a week off work. I spent 3 months helping with planning calls, vendor emails, seating charts, all of it. I did this because she was my sister and I loved her, and because seeing her get the wedding she wanted felt genuinely important to me. I want to be clear, I did not do this expecting anything in return. I did not keep score. I was not a martyr about it. I did it because I wanted to. The wedding was in April. It was beautiful. The venue was a converted barn about an hour outside of Chicago. String lights, wildflowers. Camille looked absolutely stunning. I stood at the altar in a dusty rose bridesmaid dress and watched my little sister marry a man who loved her, and I cried the good kind of tears. And I thought, this is one of those days you remember forever. I was right about that part. The reception was at the same venue, outdoor tent, fairy lights, everything Camille had wanted. I had rehearsed my maid of honor toast 3 times. I'd written it myself, refined it over 2 weeks. It was funny and warm and true. People laughed in the right places. Camille hugged me afterwards so hard I could barely breathe. 2 hours into the reception, I went looking for Daniel. He wasn't at our table. He wasn't at the bar. I did a lap around the tent and didn't find him. I checked my phone, no message. I wasn't alarmed exactly. I was mildly puzzled. I asked one of the groomsmen if he'd seen him, and the guy got this slightly uncomfortable look on his face that I filed away immediately and hoped I was misreading. I found them by accident. I had gone inside to use the restroom. The venue had a main farmhouse with bathrooms, and I took a wrong turn coming back out, ended up going through a side hallway instead of the main exit. There was a door that that led to a small outdoor area on the side of the building. It was propped open. I heard voices. I am not going to describe exactly what I saw in detail because I don't want to, and also because what I saw in those first 2 seconds was enough. It was enough. They hadn't heard me. The door was behind them. I stood there for what was probably 4 seconds but felt like 4 minutes, and then I turned around, walked back through the hallway, went into the bathroom, locked the door, and stood at the sink with the water running. In the mirror, I looked completely normal. That's the part I still think about. I looked completely normal. My face had not moved. I stood there for about 90 seconds. I did the math, the texts, the phone face down, the last 6 months of small things I had talked myself out of, the groomsman's face. I did all the math in 90 seconds, and I understood the equation completely. Then I unlocked the door, walked back into the reception, sat down at my table, and smiled at the person next to me when they made a joke. Here's the thing about being the person who holds everything together. You know how to compartmentalize. You have to. It's the skill you build over a lifetime of being the one people depend on. You put things in rooms and you close the doors and you deal with them later. I have been doing this my whole life. What I felt in those seconds, that specific, quiet, absolute devastation, I put it in a room. I closed the door. I sat at that table and I laughed at jokes and I danced with my mom, and I told Marcus's mother that the flowers were beautiful. Daniel came back to the table about 15 minutes after I did. He sat down and said he'd been outside getting some air. It was warm in the tent. I said, yeah, it was warm. He put his hand over mine. I let him. Camille came over to our table maybe an hour later, flushed and happy, a little bit of champagne in her. She hugged me from behind and said, I love you so much. I'm so glad you're here. And I said, I love you too, Cammy. And I meant it. That's the part I cannot fully explain. I meant it. I was furious and destroyed, and I meant it at the same time. Those two things existed in me simultaneously, which is a thing I did not previously know was possible. The DJ called for the last dance of the formal reception. I danced with Daniel. He held me the way he always had. We swayed, and I thought very clearly, I am never going to forgive either of you for this. And then the song ended, and we clapped for the newlyweds. I gave a second small toast later in the evening. One of those casual, everyone raised their glass moments. I don't even remember exactly what I said. Something warm and genuine sounding about the future, about happiness, about how much this day meant to all of us. People smiled. Someone behind me said, "Ah," Camille blew me a kiss. I drove back to the hotel at midnight with Daniel. We did not speak much in the car. I said I was tired. He said he was too. We went to sleep on opposite sides of the bed, which was not unusual for us after a long day of events. I stared at the ceiling for probably 3 hours. I did not confront either of them that weekend. I know that seems strange. People always ask when they hear this kind of story, why didn't you say something right then? And I understand why they ask. But I think the answer is that I was protecting something, not them, not the wedding, but myself. My own ability to get through the next 36 hours without coming apart completely in front of 120 people, including my parents. I got home to Seattle. I waited 4 days. During those 4 days, I spoke to Daniel normally. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I functioned. I was very, very calm. On the 5th day, I called a divorce attorney. On the 6th day, I confronted Daniel. He denied it for approximately 11 minutes. Then he stopped denying it. He cried. He said it had started 7 months ago. He said it was a mistake. It was stupid. He didn't know how it happened. He said he loved me. He said he was sorry. He said everything people say in these moments. And I sat across from him at our kitchen table and listened to all of it. And when he finished, I said, I want you to be out of this house by the end of the week. He asked if we could talk more. I said we could talk to attorneys. He left 4 days later. He texted me several times after that. I responded to the ones about logistics and did not respond to the ones about feelings. I did not call Camille for 2 weeks. She texted twice, normal sister stuff, and I gave short, polite responses. She didn't know that I knew. I needed those 2 weeks to figure out what I was going to say and how I was going to say it, because I knew that once I opened that door, things would break that couldn't be unbroken. My therapist will tell you, and I agree, that I have a tendency to delay difficult conversations by over-preparing for them. She is correct. I spent 2 weeks drafting and redrafting what I was going to say to Camille. I wanted to be calm. I wanted to be clear. I wanted to say exactly what was true and nothing more. I called her on a Tuesday afternoon. She answered on the second ring. Happy to hear from me. Normal Camille voice. I said, I know about you and Daniel. Silence. I found out at your wedding. I've known for 2 weeks. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to ruin your day and I needed time to process it. I'm telling you now because I think you deserve to hear it from me directly, and because I'm not going to pretend I don't know. More silence. Then she said my name. Just my name. I said, I don't need you to explain it. I don't need to hear an apology right now. I just needed you to know that I know, and I need some time. I'm going to take some time. She started crying. She said she was sorry. She said it meant nothing. She said she didn't know how to tell me and she was so ashamed and she had ended it months ago and she hated herself. She said everything that people say, and I listened to it and I said, I hear you, and then I said I had to go and I hung up. I sat in my car in my parking garage for a long time after that. I didn't cry. I'd done most of my crying in the 2 weeks prior alone in my apartment. I just sat there. It was quiet. Here is where things got complicated in ways I didn't entirely anticipate. My mother found out. I don't know who told her. I have my suspicions it was Camille, possibly looking for someone to intervene. But my mother called me about 3 weeks after my conversation with Camille, and she was crying and asking if it was true and what was happening. I told her yes, it was true. I told her the broad strokes. I did not tell her every detail because some details are mine. My mother's reaction was not what I expected. She was devastated for me. She was also almost immediately protective of Camille in a way that made me feel like the walls were closing in slightly. She made a terrible mistake. She loves you so much. She's been a mess since she told me. I just hope you can find a way through this together. I said, Mom, I just got divorced. I need you to let me have a minute. She apologized. She did. But I could feel the thing that was underneath it. The weight of wanting the family to stay intact, wanting the sisters to be okay, wanting this to be a thing that got resolved, rather than a thing that permanently changed the shape of us. And I understood that impulse. I genuinely genuinely did. But I also knew, very clearly, that I was not in a place to manage my mother's grief about my grief. I couldn't hold hers right then. My brother Eli was simpler. He called me, asked what I needed, and when I said I mostly needed people not to push me, he said okay, and has since checked in exactly once a week with a single text that usually says something like, "Hey, still here?" He is a good person, and I am grateful for him. Marcus, Camille's husband, apparently did not know. She had ended the affair before the wedding. He found out around the same time my mother did. I don't know the details of their situation, and I haven't asked, because that is genuinely not my business. I feel for him. That's a horrible position to be in, especially so early in a marriage. Camille has reached out several more times since our phone call. Long texts sometimes. She wants to talk. She wants to explain more. She wants to know if there's a path. I have not responded to most of them. I responded to 2 briefly, just to say I needed more time. That's the truth. I do need more time. It has been almost 5 months since the wedding. The divorce was finalized about 6 weeks ago. I am living alone in my apartment in Seattle, and I am, on most days, genuinely okay. I say this not to perform resilience, but because it's actually true, and I think it matters to say it. I am okay. I am sad. I am angry. I am occasionally absolutely blindsided by a moment of grief so acute it takes my breath away, usually triggered by something small, a song, or passing a restaurant we used to go to, or finding a photo of me and Camille from a few years ago that I'd forgotten about. Those moments are real, but they pass. I am in therapy, which I recommend to everyone regardless of circumstances. I have very good friends, a few of whom know the full story and have been without exception extraordinary. I have a job I find meaningful. I sleep okay. I cook actual food. I am, by all functional measures, surviving. The question I get asked most by the people who know is, do you think you'll ever talk to Camille again? And the honest answer is, I don't know. I genuinely do not know. She is my sister. She was my best friend. What she did was a profound betrayal. Not just the affair itself, but the duration of it, the context of it. My wedding was 6 months into it. I have since realized the specific cruelty of standing next to me at the altar while that was happening. I don't think she's a monster. I don't think she's irredeemable. I think she made choices that she knew were wrong, and she made them anyway, over and over, for months, and that the reckoning for those choices is going to take longer than either of us would like, maybe eventually. Not yet. The other question people ask is about Daniel, and that one is simpler. We are done. That is not a complicated sentence for me. I don't feel furious at him in the way some people might expect. I feel something quieter and in some ways worse. I feel like a person who looked at someone for 5 years and didn't fully see them. That's a specific kind of loneliness, but it doesn't make me want him back. Nothing could. I think a lot about the reception, about sitting at that table, about the toast I gave, about the fact that I stood in a farmhouse bathroom for 90 seconds, looked in a mirror, made a decision, and walked back out into the party. I have complicated feelings about that decision. Part of me thinks it was the most self-possessed thing I've ever done. Part of me thinks I should have walked directly out of that building, gotten in a car, and never looked back. But I stayed. I danced. I smiled. I gave a toast that people still message me about, that Camille's college friend said was one of the most beautiful things they'd heard at a wedding. I don't know what that makes me. I don't know if it makes me dignified or foolish or both. I know it makes me who I am. I'm posting this here because I needed to say all of it somewhere outside my own head. I don't have a question exactly. I'm not asking for judgment. I've done plenty of that myself. I guess if I'm asking anything, it's just, has anyone else been here? Not the exact details, the specific shape of this particular betrayal, but this place where you're grieving someone who is still alive, who you still love, who you don't know how to stop loving, and you have no idea what happens next, because that's where I am. And some days that's okay, and some days it really isn't.